آغاز کرتے ہیں. پروگرام میں ہمیں جوائن کر رہے ہیں ڈاکٹر جامل خان صاحب, فارمر ایمبیسڈر ہیں, ستارہ امتیاز لے چکے ہیں. ویلکم ٹو دی شو ڈاکٹر صاحب. ڈاکٹر صاحب, گفتگو کا آپ سے آغاز کرنا چاہوں گا. سب سے پہلے تو یہ بتائیے کہ آپ اس ایونٹ کو کیسا دیکھتے ہیں اور اس سے جو اہداف پاکستان ممکنہ طور پہ حاصل کرنا چاہ رہا تھا, جس کے حوالے سے ہم نے دیکھا کہ نکات بھی پیش کیے گئے اور کچھ ڈیسیز بھی ہوئے, یو تھنک کہ ہم اس اسٹیپ تک پہنچ چکے ہیں یا پہنچ پائیں گے جلد؟
نہیں, یقیناً ایک بہت اہم اہمیت کا اجلاس تھا اور یقیناً فارن آفس کو اس معاملے میں پذیرائی کرنی چاہیے کہ فارن آفس نے اتنے قلیل وقت میں, اتنے تھوڑے وقت میں ایک اتنا بڑا ایونٹ جو ہے انہوں نے ارینج کیا. سعودی عرب کی انویٹیشن پہ سارے آئے یہاں, لیکن پاکستان نے والنٹیئر کیا اپنے آپ کو میزبانی کے لیے. اور حقیقت یہی ہے جو آپ نے انٹرو میں بتایا کہ 41 سال بعد یہ ایک ایکسٹرا آرڈنری کاؤنسل آف فارن منسٹرز کی میٹنگ یہاں ہوئی ہے. کاؤنسل آف فارن منسٹر کی میٹنگ ہوتی ہے او آئی سی کے چارٹر کے مطابق, اور او آئی سی کا چارٹر کا جو آرٹیکل 10 ہے اس کے تحت ہوتا ہے, اور اس کے جو جزیات بعد میں بات کر لیں گے اس سے. لیکن آپ نے کہا کہ اہداف حاصل کیے یا نہیں کیے اہداف. ڈپلومیٹک ایفرٹس میں ملٹی لیٹرل ڈپلومیسی ہو گئی یا بائی لیٹرل ڈپلومیسی, لیکن ملٹی لیٹرل ڈپلومیسی میں جو کہ او آئی سی کے اجلاس جیسے فورم یا جنرل اسمبلی یا سیکورٹی کاؤنسل یا باقی, اس میں اہداف آل آف سڈن جو ہے اس کو ایکسپیکٹ کرنا, اور خاص طور پہ ایسے کمپلیکیٹڈ میٹر میں جہاں دنیا کے مختلف انٹرسٹ بٹے ہوئے ہیں اور امریکہ کے جو فارن پالیسی کے مطابق ان کی پریورٹیز کچھ تو ظاہری ہے اور کچھ باطنی ہے. اس لحاظ سے اگر دیکھا جائے تو پاکستان جو آگہی دینا چاہتا تھا پاکستان نے آگہی دے دی. اور اس سے سب سے بڑی بات یہ کہ جو اسلامک ڈیولپمنٹ بینک ہے اس نے ایک اکاؤنٹس کو کھول دیا, کیونکہ وہاں افغانستان میں بینکنگ سسٹم تو بالکل ختم ہوا ہے, اور اس کی بھی وجہ بات آگے چل کے بتا دیتا ہوں. لیکن جو یہ اکاؤنٹ کھلا ہے اس سے یہ فائدہ ہو جائے گا کہ کل جو گفتگو ہوئی جس میں کہ سعودی عرب کے فارن منسٹر نے بھی اور باقی ویسے بھی گفتگو ہوئی کہ جو فائنینشلی سپورٹ کیا جائے, تو او آئی سی کے ممبرس نے کل کوئی پلیچ تو نہیں کیا, لیکن کیونکہ یہ فارن منسٹرز کی میٹنگ تھی, کاؤنسل آف فارن منسٹر کی, اور اگر یہ ہیڈ آف اسٹیٹ کی میٹنگ ہوتی اسی او آئی سی چارٹر کے آرٹیکل 8 کے مطابق, تو ہیڈ آف اسٹیٹ وہ ابرپٹلی کچھ نہ کچھ اناؤنس کر سکتے تھے. فارن منسٹر چاہتے تو اپنے ملک کے مینڈیٹ لے کے آتے, کوئی پیکج دے سکتے تھے, بات سوائے سعودی عرب کے 1 بلین ریال کے, اور کسی نے کوئی آ کے اناؤنسمنٹ نہیں کی. امید ہے کہ آگے جا کے وہ اس کو کر سکتے ہیں. اس قسم کے ملٹی لیٹرل جو فورمز ہوتے ہیں اور جو میٹنگ ہوتی ہے, سبمٹ ہوتی ہے, اس میں کنٹریز اپنے بائی لیٹرل مفاد کو بھی ذہن میں رکھتے ہیں کہ ان کے باقی کس سے کیا کیا ٹائز ہیں. جیسے کہ امریکہ کے انفلوئنس میں اس میں کتنے ملک ہیں, ظاہر ہے او آئی سی کے بہت سارے ممالک سعودی عرب سمیت امریکہ کے انفلوئنس میں ہیں, تو اس کی جو باقی توقعات اگر دیکھی جائے تو اس کو اگر آپ لنک کریں جو جیو پولیٹیکل اس وقت سچویشن چل رہی ہے اس خطے میں اور دنیا میں, تو اندازہ ہو جاتا ہے کہ افغانستان میں کیا کیا انٹرسٹ کس کس کے ہو سکتے ہیں. اب میں آپ کو بتا دیتا ہوں کہ افغانستان اس میں امریکہ کا ظاہر ہے سب سے بڑا انٹرسٹ ہے, کیونکہ امریکہ جس طریقے سے افغانستان سے نکلا ہے وہ ایک ہزیمت ہوئی ہے, اور اس نے اپنے عوام کو ان کا جن کا مڈ ٹرم الیکشن ہونے والا ہے سینٹ کا, تو اس میں ڈیموکریٹس کو خاص طور کو اس طریقے سے اپنے آپ کو مینج کرنا پڑے گا کہ ان کی اس ہزیمت کے حوالے سے انہیں نقصان نہ ہو. اور اس اسٹیج پر اگر وہ کھول کر یہ بتانا چاہیں کہ جی ہم ہزیمت بھی اٹھا کے آئے اور پھر اب ہم افغانستان میں جو ہے سارے کام کر رہے ہیں, تو شاید کی عوام اس معاملے میں کچھ کوشچنز اٹھانا شروع کرے. لیکن اس سے بڑی بات ہے دوسری بڑی بات یہ ہے کہ امریکہ کا پہلے تو ہم نے یہ تعین کرنا ہے کہ ان کے اس وقت فارن پالیسی کا جو سب سے کلیدی نقطہ ہے وہ کیا ہے. جو
فارن پالیسی کے نقطے پہ آتا ہوں سر, ڈاکٹر
افغانستان کے حوالے سے
بالکل میں آتا ہوں اس نقطے پہ, اور میں آپ سے یہ جاننا چاہوں گا. پروگرام میں ابھی ہمیں جوائن کر رہے ہیں میتھیو برائزا فارمر ایمبیسڈر ہیں یو ایس کے, اور ہمیں جوائن کر رہے ہیں. میتھیو برائزا کے ساتھ گفتگو ہم انگریزی زبان میں کریں گے, اور آن ورڈ جو ہے وہ اس سیگمنٹ کے اندر جب تک برائزا ہیں تب تک ہم انگریزی زبان میں اس گفتگو کنٹینیو رکھیں گے تاکہ وہ بھی ایکولی پارٹیسپیٹ کر سکیں. ویلکم ٹو دا شو ایمبیسڈر برائزا. Pakistan has conducted a big event of OIC, and after 41 years we see big movement of world leaders here in our country. The core purpose was to get hold of something which can improve the situation there in Afghanistan. And primarily that is the funds that are required to run Afghanistan. There's an amount of around $9 billion per year that is required to run the system in Afghanistan, right? And that has been held by IMF, World Bank, and US itself. Do you think that is there any possibility in the near future that the US or the rest of the power is gonna release those funds? And if they are going to do it, then why do you think they are going to do it? And if they are not going to do it, then why do you think they would not allow this under such circumstances?
Well, thanks very much for having me with you, and congratulations to Pakistan on hosting the OIC meeting. I personally believe that soon the United States and the international financial institutions and all the global community is going to have no choice but to release the funds. They're going to have to release the funds because the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan is so horrible and getting worse. I mean, the cliche, unfortunately, we always hear is the worst humanitarian crisis in the world is in Yemen. But more and more I'm hearing it's becoming Afghanistan, and it's just utterly immoral. No matter how much political figures might lament the fact that the Taliban is in power, and with all of the problems that the Taliban brings to itself, and with the extremist tendencies or currents now overflowing or backing up into Pakistan, nobody in the United States is happy, obviously, about the Taliban being in power, would like to keep pressure on it. But from a humanitarian perspective, this can't go on. And, I was reading articles over the weekend about the grave health crisis throughout the country. Nutrition, but health. This is a disaster left behind, no matter how much my former colleagues, whom I respect and love in many cases, want to turn the other way. This is of the U.S. making by pulling out so haphazardly and leaving this vacuum that's being filled by the Taliban. So, if we believe in our foreign policy based on both values and interests, then we have to release funds.
Right. So, Mr. Matthew, I mean, there are three main divisions which we see in this $9 billion one, which I understand is IMF, the financial institution, and the World Bank. And third is U.S. itself. If you think that U.S. will release this fund and there's no other choice, then why would it do it? I mean, it can also happen that financial institutions might release those funds, which will be maybe around 4 or 5 billion, and then there would be rest of 50% not released by U.S. I mean, why U.S. would release that fund? I mean, when they were there, they were, spending that amount for the development of Afghanistan because they've fought for like many years and there's a lot of destruction, and now they want to cope up with that. Now they are not there. Why would they spend money? Number one, and number two is if financial institutions resume their money, things will work out. How do you see this?
Well, I think the IMF and the World Bank are unlikely to do anything that the U.S. strongly opposes because the United States is the largest shareholder of both institutions. In other words, in simple terms, the U.S. gives way more money to the IMF and the World Bank than anyone else does. In a situation like this, those institutions are going to follow the U.S. lead. Not to mention, the World Bank has traditionally been headed by an American, while the IMF is headed by a European. But the IMF, whoever the head is, can never get that job without the U.S.'s approval. So they won't follow a different path. But to answer your other question, why is the United States holding the money back? I think it's domestic politics largely. I mean, I think the Biden administration at this point is really ashamed at how horrible the withdrawal was, and they know that that withdrawal made President Biden politically vulnerable and the Democratic Party politically vulnerable because he won the election, and by the way, I voted for him, so thank God he won. but he won the election not because people necessarily love Joe Biden, although I've worked with him personally and really do respect him, but the Americans voted for somebody who would seem competent, who could manage the government well after the circus of the Trump administration. And so the withdrawal from Afghanistan really called into doubt whether or not he truly is competent or is still competent. And so you see his approval rating drop dramatically in August as that fiasco was unfolding, the tragedy in Kabul. So now I think he's trying, his administration is trying to figure out how do they not look weak, and how do they look like they're still managing the situation and not simply surrendering to the Taliban after this 20 years of a horrible war that cost so much blood and treasure. So that's the reason. It's domestic politics right now that is preventing Biden from doing what eventually he's going to have to do and release the funds.
Right. You stay with me. Dr. Jamil, whatever Mr. Bryza is saying, I mean, for instance, if we assume that financial institutions and U.S. resumes whatever is required to run Afghanistan, do you think there will still be a need of Pakistan or a good relation with Pakistan for U.S. in order to run that money or in order to run Afghanistan in a better way? But now we see that there's a rift between U.S. and Pakistan, or let me just say this, there's a gap. I mean, that is pretty evident. How things will go ahead if the funds would be released by U.S. and the financial institutions?
No, I think our Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister yesterday made it very clear, and even the deliberations during the OIC mood yesterday, it gives an indication that if we bring politics with the humanitarian crisis, and it's, by the way, going to be the biggest human crisis, after Yemen in the known history. It started already, and it's the United Nations, so many head of the departments, they have started saying that, including the World Food Program Director, Mr. David, and they have said that the people have started dying with the hunger there. And 75% of the external budget, once it's totally stopped, and their own asset, Afghanistan's own asset, 9.5 billion, if it's not being released. So, I heard, and we know about the way U.S. was compelled to withdraw, or because of the mismanagement, as it was being mentioned. So the way it withdrew, and obviously it's bringing a heavy toll on the current U.S. government and Joe Biden's government. So from that angle, yes, I totally understand that domestic politics and the forthcoming election in U.S., but at the same time, are we running against time? I think most of people like myself and some of the members of the OIC yesterday, they thought that we are running against time. And if the situation slips off from the hand of the world community or from the hand of those who really think that $2.6 trillion is spent in this region by the U.S. and 20 years, and after that, if they go back to the same situation where incidents like 9/11 could take place, so that's a good deal as a matter for the national security and for the side itself. And if that happens, let me also bring out about one or two points which would give us a clear idea and also moral grounds that what way Taliban, whether Taliban are helped or not, that's a different thing, but Afghan people, there are 40 million Afghan people. In Doha Agreement, the part one was the responsibility of U.S., which they have given the commitment in writing, and U.S. has its own values, which has been always, thriving and known as to maintain their value and as to, take the world along with their leadership. And imagine, here is the document, which is a document which has been submitted even the United Nations, and that document is the first part of that document is the responsibility of U.S., and it says in its paragraph D, says that the U.S. would initiate the review of sanctions which U.S. had imposed, and in its next paragraph, which is paragraph E of the part 1, it says that U.S. would diplomatically engage with the number of Security Council members, and try and get the sanction list removed for the Taliban. And this is one of the crucial points, because some of the members.
Dr. Jamil, I get that. My point is, this is written. This has to happen. This is what you're saying. We all are being so optimistic, like Mr. Matthew especially. My question is, if we look at the scenario right now, there are sanctions. in case if they do not lift those sanctions immediately or maybe in the near future, and also the financial institutions juxtaposed to whatever the U.S. is doing, like Matthews also mentioned, the relations between both institutions. My question is, what will be the situation? And there's another school of thought which is so strong, and that says that U.S. really wants disturbance in this point, and why would it not be? Like, because disturbance in Afghanistan would create disturbance in China, one of the biggest rivals. Disturbance in Afghanistan will create disturbance in Iran, one of the big problems. The Central Asian countries, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, somehow still under influence of Russia. Why would not, U.S. do something, really, disturbing here in Afghanistan by, holding back the money, and for that they would have like 20 reasons. So this is a very strong school of thought. How would you respond to this?
It doesn't stand today.
Doesn't stand today, but still it is. I mean, the sanctions are there. I mean, if it continues, what will be the situation?
Are you asking me?
Yes, Dr. Jamil.
Are you asking me this question?
Yes, Dr. Jamil.
Right. Basically, if the U.S. follows the same policy as it is following
Right
post 15th of August, then people, analysts like myself, would have no option but to raise their skepticism of probably thinking that U.S. really wants to do what you have just said, means that control destabilization, which means that U.S. now reset in the foreign policy of containment of China. If there is a disturbance in Afghanistan, it engulfs some disturbance, or it spreads the disturbance in neighboring country, including Pakistan, which would mean one of the flagship portion of the U.S. Of the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative would automatically get some stumbling block. And in that case, the reset foreign policy of U.S. would be attained without spending much money in this region. But again, there is a red line to it. There is a red flag.
Got it.
And that red flag is, if they leave it totally attended Afghanistan, then Afghanistan would then turn to be a safe haven for all the terrorist groups of the
All
world.
the terrorists, all
and
the problems.
Then, perhaps we'll go back.
That will become a hot spot. Okay, this
We'll
school
go
of thought
back.
is there. You stay with me, Dr. Jamil. You stay with me. That school of thought is still there. Mr. Matthews, I want you to answer the same question that I've asked Dr. Jamil. Also, I want you to expand on Pakistan and U.S. role, but I'll ask this question later. How do you see, I mean, if the situation goes like this, what is right now, what is going to happen? I mean, there's another school of thought really strong says that U.S. can achieve lots of things out of this. I mean, China, Russia, and Iran. Why not, continuing this situation?
Not the way American foreign policy works. I mean, I understand that everyone on, wherever country they're in thinks that wherever they are, that's the focal point.
Right.
And you tend to get a parochial vision. The same for Americans, right? I mean, what has driven American foreign policy is concerns about itself, is about another 9/11 attack happening from the territory of Afghanistan. So as our friend was just saying right now, left unattended, the conventional wisdom, such as it is in Washington, is that we're going to get another Afghanistan with the same problems, right? With ISIS-K, it's one of the other 32 or whatever terrorist groups that are operating in Afghanistan. So from the American mentality perspective, the whole reason we went into Afghanistan was to prevent it from becoming a platform for terrorist attacks against the U.S. It wasn't to rebuild Afghanistan as a democracy or a thriving economy. That all came later. The original reason was to prevent terrorist attacks against the United States. And that's why President Biden said, we can get out now because, Al-Qaeda is destroyed. And so letting things go and letting the weeds grow again and having a disaster situation, that's terrible for the American foreign policy. But number two, believe it or not, we have this belief that if we broke it, we bought it. We need to fix it. And we broke Afghanistan with this war, and it's a huge dark spot in the history of American foreign policy. The U.S. lost. It lost a war with all of its high-tech capabilities, like to say the most capable military in the world. It lost to the Taliban, and it lost for a number of reasons. We could go into the corruption of the old Afghani government, or the Taliban knowing how to fight on their own territory better, or having their heart in it more. Whatever it is, or you can argue corruption of the military-industrial complex in the United States. We lost. And so Afghanistan remains mired in dysfunctionality and tragedy. That's a terrible stain on U.S. history. We have all sorts of other ways to confront Russia and China and Iran, but Afghanistan won't be the instrument for that. I'm certain of that.
Instrument for that. Mr. Matthew, you stay with me. We would thank Dr. Jamil, and we'll go for the break. And Mr. Matthew, can you please expand on, sir, what is going on between Pakistan and U.S.? I mean, you've been so close to Biden. You've worked with him actually. So, I mean, your president is not calling up prime minister. What is going on, sir? How would things work ahead?
I think there's, first of all, there's just fatigue with the Biden administration, being overwhelmed by crises, problems, domestically, legislation failing to recover from the pandemic, and how to deal with China, Russia, Ukraine, as we mentioned before, the efforts to return to the JCPOA agreement regarding Iran's nuclear program not going well, and then the Afghanistan debacle. So I think that
there's so much on the plate.
There's so much on the plate, but then there's another big problem, which is a misunderstanding of what's happening in Pakistan. The same thing is here. I live in Istanbul, as in Turkey, where the Turkish government has become a sort of a negative brand in Washington. There's for a number of reasons, and no matter what arguments you bring to the contrary, there's still misinterpretations, misunderstandings that are not accurate. So same with Pakistan.
Mr. Matthew, that whatever the confusions are, like you're mentioning, the right way is to sit and talk and let's resolve, because we've worked so close with each other's, with different leaders, of course, and there's way forward ahead as well. So why don't these two leaders sit and talk?
Good question. I completely agree with the thrust of it. I mean, if Joseph Biden can talk to Vladimir Putin, my God, he's got to be able to talk to him on, right? Come on. And, Russia has decided that the United States is its enemy, is its foe. The United States needs Pakistan in Afghanistan, not to mention for many other reasons. Yeah. So I think it's really unwise to freeze out Prime Minister Khan, but it's the same way Biden didn't talk to Recep Tayyip Erdogan for months and months and months for no good reason. So I agree with the thrust of your question.
Right. Mr. Matthew, I'm running short of time. Last question, sir. U.S. does not recognize Pakistan's effort that, which Brigadier Farouk is also mentioning, and this long list of efforts that Pakistan or sacrifices Pakistan has given. Why it is like this in U.S.? I mean, it's always a concern in Pakistan's quarters, not in this government, in the previous governments as well. Why?
I think that the super complexities of Pakistan's domestic political, cultural situation gets drowned out. It gets overshadowed by the sort of the mainline arguments and reasons why the U.S. went to war in Afghanistan. And so that was to get bin Laden, right? And so if he shows up in Pakistan and then the U.S. goes there and executes him, what resonates, like a bell that has been rung and it continues sort of ringing and resonating, but for years, is that bin Laden got safe harbor in Pakistan. And so therefore, wow, like how can we work with that country? And even though we need to, we have to, and the Pakistani military is, again,
before this went, I mean, the situation was pretty much the same before the bin Laden was, executed or neutralized. The situation was pretty much the same. Why?
The U.S. wasn't paying attention to TPP and the other concerns of Pakistan, and that's because we're selfish. We went to Afghanistan, right, to destroy Al-Qaeda and to protect the U.S. homeland. And so,
I remember Hillary Clinton, one of the addresses in the Senate, I guess, she was talking about whatever the U.S. has done in war in Afghanistan and how they used Pakistan as well. I'm not sure you've seen that clip or not, but I've seen Hillary Clinton talking about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I didn't see that clip, though I've seen a lot of Hillary Clinton clips. But I do recall early on, in about 2002, and I was overseeing U.S. relations with Central Asia, and we were figuring out how to show our gratitude and how to provide some economic help and assistance. Right. And I remember I got shot down when I said, but Uzbekistan has played a key role. Mm-hmm. And my superiors at the White House said, yeah, but we really need to focus on Pakistan. and providing monetary assistance to show our gratitude. So we thought that was going to be enough instead of really helping Pakistan with this other terrorist struggle. That was too much for us,
Right.
for better, for
Right.
Sorry.
Thank you so much. We had Senator Matthew Bryza with us. Always an honor speaking with you.